Yeah, it's got a certain transparency filter on the side there. Wait till it goes recursive.
The impregnable nature of the fractal universe represented in the video chat.
Okay, hopefully this works. Okay, so hi. I'm Richard. I'm currently playing the role of designer at Loomio. And the point of this heading, Design for Developers, was sort of to try and bust the idea that a designer is an identity. Because welcome. All good. I really don't identify as a designer. I think of designers as people that wear turtlenecks and that have good fashion and are very stylish and are good at drawing and things like that. And I don't really identify with those things. But I do identify as a developer. And I have perceived, and I don't know if this is fair, but I've perceived that there's a lot of other developers that sort of share that sort of view that designer is someone over there. I'm a developer. I'm not good at that. That's not for me. And so what you find is a lot of developers building stuff without having an actual clear idea of what the design is before they start, and sort of tricking themselves into thinking that they can just develop their way there, rather than actually identifying, hey, I'm doing some design at the moment. Hey, I'm doing some development. So I've been sort of, without much conscious thought, I've been leading out on the front-end design for Loomio for the last couple of months. And so my plan was basically just to download my workflow, because there's some parts of it I think that would be useful to lots of different kinds of design projects. And then if we've got any time, I don't know how long it's going to take, but if we've got time, then just have some questions and answers and discussion about how that might apply to the work that you're doing. So as I run through it, do feel free to ask like clarifying questions in that, but save the discussion points for once I've got through several screens. So I guess starting from the very highest level, design's about finding a user experience that you could then improve. So this was where Loomio came from. That's a picture of the camp at Occupy Wellington. The General Assembly was both the high point and the low point of Occupy, and there's something really magical and inspiring about it. But it has terrible UX because only one person can speak at a time, and everyone's got to be in the same room to participate. So we thought, you know, that's a real problem that real people care about. We know these people. We found more people that care about that problem, and then we said, can we engage you in this process to give you a prototype to try and solve that problem? So, like, the most important thing about design is starting with a problem that people actually care about, and then engaging with those people and staying in contact with them from the earliest possible date. So with Loomio, we went from the first vague idea to having real users using the real platform in under a month. And I would be surprised. I think most apps you could do the same thing with, basically. That it only has to solve the tiniest part of the problem, but enough that people care about it and that you can then engage them in an ongoing process to discover what the most important next thing is that you should be working on. So right up the front, I have accessibility. So I really recommend to any developer and any designer that you spend just, I mean, like one day getting to know a screen reader is a really easy and really important investment, and it'll make you a much better designer, much better developer. So a screen reader is how blind people navigate the web. It translates what's on the screen into audio stream, and so instead of interfacing with a two-dimensional spatial plane, you're suddenly dealing with a tree, like a phone menu. You know, when you call up the bank, you've got a phone menu to go through. Once you have a little taste of how screen readers interpret the web, you'll realize that, well, first of all, you'll realize that all the websites you've built to date are really crap. And second, that it's actually really easy to overcome that, and there's some really simple best practices that will improve the accessibility of your site, but actually in the process of thinking about what is the blind user experience, you're also going to vastly improve the user experience for everyone. And so that's just stuff like really basic first principles of accessibility are things like every page has exactly one H1. So there's only one title for the page, there's one heading. And so that means each page should do only one thing. And just the process of looking at your app and going like, what is the one H1 for this page going to be, suddenly reveals all this unnecessary complexity you've got on the page. And similarly, you have to break your page into logical sections so that they can navigate from I'm in this section, I'm in that section. And so you have to be really strict about putting a box around and saying this is one block of content and this is another block. And you have to be strict about labeling each of those blocks. And that process is really revealing as well. And sort of the UI comes out of that information architecture. So it helps you think about the hierarchy of most important information and how things nest inside each other and so on, and what role each section's playing. This thing here totally is a really sweet little toolkit for. You run it across any website, and it sort of highlights which parts of your accessibility could be improved. So it says like, hey, you've got two H1s on this page, or this image doesn't have a caption or a alt tag and things like that. So that's just a really simple tool that will help you like identify what the dumb problems are.
And you can get it as a Chrome plugin.
Yeah, and I'm really happy to support anyone that wants to get better at doing accessibility development. And I've got some work to do to pull together a workshop and blog post for that too. The other super important thing is this idea of mobile first. So this is a book by Luke Robilewski from A Book Apart. So A List Apart is like the best ever, one of the oldest and best resources for web developers and designers and that. And they do a series called A Book Apart, and this book has sort of spawned an attitude or an approach to design. The idea is start with your mobile experience. So that means figuring out how to solve your problems in 320 pixels and one column. And many apps that I've seen, the first prototype is like 2 or 3 columns and there's heaps of stuff going on because you think you've got all these important things to do. And when you force yourself to just think about it in terms of what can I do with one column and 320 pixels, it will force that information hierarchy, and you get a lot of clarity out of it. And then so once you've got your one column sorted, then when you transition up to bigger devices with bigger screens, then all that space is now a bonus that you can play with in intelligent ways. Really short book, really recommend reading it, easy peasy. The other one is testing. So a lot of developers I know are really daunted by the idea of user testing. Partly it's like a social anxiety thing, like a lot of devs don't really like talking to humans. But partly it's just like, oh, it's a skill set I don't have. And so what I've been trying to do myself and what I try to recommend to others as well is like, don't worry about comprehensive testing if that's like out of reach. You'll get so much value out of just showing your software to a couple of people. So like that might mean drawing a mock-up and then just showing it to 3 people in the office and just hearing what they have to say about it. You don't have to have a formalized process for like doing statistical analysis or recording everyone or setting it up so it's like super scientific or anything like that, but just focus on that top left part of the graph there. Like you get heaps of easy wins from just showing it to a couple of people. And just the practice of articulating out loud to someone, hey, this app is for blank, can you try and do blank? Like saying that out loud makes you a much better developer too, because you actually remember who you're designing for and what you're trying to develop, and what articulating that leads to better code. And on that, I have an opinion that's quite strong that you should draw everything. Don't ever build anything without having first drawn it. And I'd say with Loomio, probably about 90% of our feature development is past that test. So it's not just one of those things I tell people to do. Drawing things is super important, and it's so much cheaper than building the wrong thing. And it's just, when you have a feature idea in your head, what you're doing is highlighting all the cool things and ignoring all the hard stuff that you don't want to think about. And when you draw it, it forces you to encounter all the problems that you don't really want to think about, like where does the menu go, or how do I get from A to B. And so I've got a range of different tools, and this is really where I want to start going a little bit deeper, is to show you like, okay, how do you draw it, how do you show people, that sort of thing. So the first one, paper and pen. I'm really crap at drawing, you may be able to tell, but I can drive a pen, and in the space of like an hour sitting down, so this was a little project I did the other week with looking at Google Inbox, which is their new email app, and then looking at Loomio and going, if Loomio was Inbox, what would it be? You know, like just trying to copy as much as possible, copy over their logic onto our app. And with pen and paper, I'd redesign the entire app from scratch in under an hour. And it's a really useful process for like breaking down your sacred cows and discovering heaps of wins that, we're not gonna wind up building this like this, but I did discover a lot of really easy wins that we can then pull back into the existing app. And anyone can do it too. You can sit around. We did this great session the other week with like 6 people each drew a version of this marketing brochure on this project we're running, and it's just like anyone can just quickly scribble something down, and you get a lot of really, really useful ideas come out that way. And now I carry around a notebook, and sometimes in a cafe I'll draw the next idea. It's really, really great process. Something you'll notice about this if you're a design nerd is that I'm using a thing called Material. So Material is a relatively new framework from Google. All of the Google apps are built in this framework called Material, and it's a comprehensive specification for how you build apps. So like, when should you use a menu versus when you should use a modal versus when you should use a dialogue. There's comprehensive rules for the whole lot. Like, how do you do spacing? How do you do margins, rhythm, ratios? All those sorts of things have got answers for you. And it took me a while to get my head around it. And now I sort of think about it like, if you're familiar with, say, like Ruby on Rails, Rails provides you with this framework for doing all of the important stuff that you need to do on any website. Material, or there are other UI frameworks out there as well, but having a UI framework frees you up to focus on the important stuff. And like, there's no way that anyone in this room is going to beat Google in terms of like coming up with usable menus. Like, there's no point you designing a different way of doing a menu. Just follow their best practices, because they work for thousands of apps on so many different kinds of devices. And they've taken the trouble of open sourcing it all, which is this is supreme resource. And I really recommend, even just as an exercise, like kind of spending an afternoon and going through the Material spec, and with an app that you have or one that you're thinking about, just draw it out and go like, if I was following the Material spec, how would I do it? And you'll sort of uncover like, oh, okay, there's simple things like every page, like I said, every page has got one title, and thinking about like what goes in that nav menu on the left, what goes in the title, and what you're going to put in the, what are your key actions that are going to be up there, and what are you going to be your sort of secondary menu actions. Going through that process really like uncovers what's the important stuff to reveal to users, and sort of naturally leads you down to coming up with a really great user experience. That's really simple, and it's consistent. Because you've got a very comprehensive set of rules, it'll be consistent inside of your app. So all of your forms look the same, all of the buttons look the same. But it's also increasingly becoming consistent outside across the web, because so many people are adopting Material really, really quickly. Like, I was sort of experimenting with it, and then the next thing I knew, the new Slack app is in Material, the new Envision app is in Material. Trello's picking up aspects of it, and it's just like more and more people are going like, well, it doesn't make sense for the most part to invent your own UI system. Just use one that exists.
Quick clarification. What do you mean by rhythm?
Rhythm. Oh, just like so that in this case, that 64 there in the middle, you'll find all across there. So this is on their, I think it's on their tablet size format. Basically, any element is going to be a fraction or a multiplier of 64. So it's like it'll be 640 wide or 320 high and things like that. And they're just like really basic rules that appeal to a developer brain that like I don't feel like I'm good at typography or visual layout or stuff like that, but it gives you a set of rules and you just follow them and then it looks good and people are like, oh, that's nice. Oh, and little things like you see the light blue areas. That's the clickable region on any one of those icons, and that is about the size of your thumb. So it works really. It's like designed with mobile in mind from the ground up. Lots and lots of little wins like that. Things like how does your app work on different devices in different languages, and left to right and right to left languages, things like that. Like it's all in there, and they've thought about it all. So it's just such a huge, tremendous resource. So I would say do that unless you've got a good reason not to. So the Material is sort of the framework. Sketch is my primary tool. So one of the reasons I think that I was allergic to design was because of Adobe, like especially Illustrator. Like I just don't understand it, and I've really sunk a few hours into trying to get my head around it, and it just nothing comes naturally to me. and it really put me off. Like I basically thought that I just didn't understand how vectors work, but it was just because Illustrator's like got a particular logic model that doesn't make sense to my brain. Sketch is basically a design tool that was built for people that are familiar with the web. It works. It shares a lot in common with the way that CSS works. So you set up styles, you change the style, it changes across your whole document. Or you can have an element and you can change this element. It's called a symbol in Sketch. And when you change the element in one screen, it replicates across the whole screen. So it integrates really well with other web tools as well. So like you can export CSS directly out of your design files, and it really easily handles exporting assets and stuff like that as well, icons and images and stuff like that. And it's increasingly well adopted too. Like when you open a new sketch file, it gives you the option, for instance, of would you like to open the material design sticker sheet? So it integrates really well with InVision, which is another tool I'm about to show you. It's sort of very rapidly becoming industry standard, and it's one of the reasons I feel like confident in doing this design stuff is because I've learned how to drive a tool that's super powerful and pushes me in the right direction. So I wanted to show quickly like a bit of my workflow with Sketch. So first up, I've got, this is like basically a development file. So if I go like this, this is this is me looking at different options for what should be our home screen and what should be in the nav bar. So each horizontal row is another option, and so it's like, well, if I'll zoom in on one so you can see it. So if we that one there, well, that shouldn't go anyway. It's like if I choose this, so we've got the home button, the groups button, the search bar, notifications, and then your user menu. If I'm going to have those in the nav bar, then what goes on this screen, and then what do the other screens look like? This is showing different filtering options, blah blah blah. Whoa, what's that? It's sort of like taking one set of decisions and then mapping them out and go, how does this affect the rest of the app? And then doing a different set of decisions. Okay, this one here, we've chosen to use larger labels and a slightly different set. And so we've got 3 here instead of 2. How does that play out across the rest of the app? And on and on and on like that. So that's like, the process with this was go on a long walk, really, like just explore the options, and then show the options to a few people, and then hear what they say, and then draw what they suggest. So like, it's really important to get feedback, but so much feedback is like, it's easy for it to be useless. It's easy for someone to say like, oh, you should do this, but they haven't considered what are the implications of that across the rest of the site. So if you can just capture what they say, and usually in a really quick format, just like quote what they say, and then go away for a few hours and draw everything for them and come back and say, oh, look, this part was awesome, but this is what it's revealed, and you get into an ongoing process. So that's how this sort of basically took like a week to map out all these different options, and it made it really easy as a group to decide like, well, this is obviously the one that's the most coherent for where we're at right now, and we can see this is sort of future that we'd like to get to. So that's sort of like, yeah, that was a development file. That's like a big exploration. The other sketch file that I use all the time is basically it's like the next up. So this is a file that has mock-ups of every single screen in the app, and they are designed to the point they're basically like one sprint away from where we currently are. So there's the app as it currently is, and then every 2 weeks we're doing releases on top of that. So this file has all of the screens. So and it's broken up kind of into logical workflows. So like this is this is the dashboard, and then just going horizontally. Oh yeah, the next screen shows you what happens when you hit what they call a floating action button. It opens up these menus to pull up the key actions. And as you go, what do we got here? This is the unread screen. Different filters on the dashboard, that's what we're looking at. This is the unread screen. This is the groups page. This is showing you, so on and on and on. That's one, in Sketch they call that a page. And then there's this page which shows you how to invite people. and this page, which shows you what it looks like when you start a group, and then this page, which shows you what it's like when you start a thread. So it's just like comprehensive. Every single screen is drawn, and this whole file is, like I said, just like one step ahead of where we are now, and we combine this with Envision, which I'm going to show you. But Envision is basically a place on the cloud where all the devs can see these designs, and we use Trello to slice them up into logical jobs and to order them in priority. So like there's a backlog that has, well, these are all the things we need to do, but then there's this week we're focused on these 3 things. So it's like build this form, build that form, build this form, and each of those tickets will be linked to the specific part of Envision that shows you the mockups. So this thing is our it's where we orient all of our product development work to, and one of the upsides of that is you're orienting to the user view. So even though there's like all this hidden work underneath that to actually make it work, all the architectural decisions and so on underneath that to make it work, the dev team handles that, but the way that we are coordinating ourselves and estimating and setting up what we're going to do next and so on, that's all done in a user-facing way.
Rich,
Yeah.
question, how long does this take you? And how easy is it in Sketch to reuse elements?
Yeah.
Is it like that looks like a lot of work? And I guess I'm just wondering like how much. Like,
If I can just show you quickly, so this button down here is a symbol.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to like modify it sort of like that,
mm-hmm.
it replicates through all the other ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're sort of building up resources.
Okay.
And how long does it take? I don't know. Like, it definitely requires you to stop and step away and go, I'm in design mode. I'm drawing. Like, and it takes time. Like, it takes time, and that's part of the job, the design for developers thing as well, is to go like to actually value the design time and realize that it's so much cheaper than building the wrong thing. Like, so much cheaper. It's like 100 times faster to draw something than it is to build something. So it takes as long as it needs to take. And the tool is like Sketch. There's a couple of little quirks about it, like a couple, but for the most part, it feels like the most like streamlined, easiest possible system. It's just such a good tool for the job that it's like it's really enjoyable to do. It doesn't feel like a drag. Like, oh my god, I have to move all of these pixels over. Like, it's really sweet. And coupled with using a UI framework, it's sort of like you've got a lot of the decisions made for you as well. So you're kind of like rearranging modules rather than having to draw everything from scratch.
Did it take you a while to learn how to use the tool in a way that meant you weren't repeating yourself, or does it really lend itself to?
It does lend itself to it. I didn't find it that hard to pick up because it does share the same logic as CSS and HTML in a lot of ways. So like I can show you examples of that. Like that's funny big screen. So this is the style that we're using. I've just started actually bringing the styles into line. Like, this is literally the CSS class that we use in the app as well as in Sketch now. We're unifying those. So any instance of that LMO card heading, is that one there as well? I haven't always used them well, but yeah. So if I change that, to black, then they'll all change to black. So it's like it just follows the same patterns that I was already familiar with CSS. And you can, like I was saying, you can do a. I'm not going to get into detail of it. It's annoying, but.
So it does rely upon, you having really clean CSS.
Well, you could. I mean, plenty of people will use this without having any clue about how CSS works, but it's just the underlying logic is in alignment with it, and it does push you in the direction of coming up with clean styles. Simple things like on my one of the accessibility things is about having contrast, testing to make sure that the contrast of your text on the background meets certain standards. And so now if you go into the Loomio mixins file, you'll see there's a color that's called gray on white, so that's that color there, and there's another color called gray on gray, and that's that color there, and that's a really excellent name for a class to actually specify exactly what it is and what it's used for. It's really easy, really usable. And that sort of immediately leads us down another track, which is approaches to naming your CSS classes, which is probably a different session. But the short story is we're using BEM, B-E-M, which is I guess a rationale or an approach to namespacing all of your CSS classes, which I'll just show you really quickly because it's awesome. So let's see, oops, groups page CSS. So you've got the groups page. That's the block. B and BEM is block. I think, and Rob knows this much better than me, but I just copy and paste. And then all of the sub parts of it are just namespace like this. So you can really there's no nesting. Everything's flat. And you can pretty much guess before. You don't even have to look at the HTML to know what the name is probably going to be. So you can actually use your brain to browse to the right place and edit the right thing. It's super powerful, and it took me a while to get my head around. It feels a bit funny at first, but since we've embraced it, and as the app gets more and more complex, it's just totally gold. And it means that our app is super modular as well.
It's kind of like things like these smacks.
Yeah.
Like, seems a bit less complicated.
Yeah. Really, we played with smacks for a while as well, and then in the end, it sort of came down to a coin toss, and we went with BEM. But, basically, having any kind of structure to CSS naming is probably a good start. So this, like I say, this is the this file is the next up version, and then beyond that we have the sort of future explorations file. So this one is just imagine, like, ignore where the app is at now. Imagine we have all of the time in the world and all the resources we need. What would the app look like? That's like a whole other design project, and you want to keep them quite separate from like what we're working on this week, because the two can be quite different. So here's an example, and this is the result of tidying up those paper mock-ups that I was drawing a couple of weeks ago, and really strictly following the material design spec. So and also this idea of doing everything mobile first as well. So I'll show you. What's that? Little things like, okay, if you've got, instead of, because what we've got in the current version I showed you, there's like all these things in the navigation header. When you shrink those down to mobile, suddenly you've just got a whole stack of icons that don't mean anything. And so doing it the material way instead, they say, no, just put that all on the side menu, and then you open it out, and you've got as much space as you need to put all the things that you need to put in it. Really simple once you see it, but then it's really good to apply to the stuff that you're actually working on. The other thing is you'll notice, so this is like the home screen, and it's got one particular nav bar, and then when you're inside a thread, so this is a list of threads, and then once you actually go into a thread, the nav bar changes so that you don't have all the same options. Your main option is to go back to where you were. And that reinforces for the user the idea that there's like kind of a nested list and you're going down into it. We've really discovered a lot with our user interviews that people don't really understand that there's so there's your dashboard, and then your group, and then your thread, and then your proposal, and then your vote. Like, they're all nested inside each other, and people don't really understand because the UI doesn't really reinforce that in any way. So part of what we're trying to do is use little tricks like that to go indicate the hierarchy that you're in. So it's like now that index of threads becomes the trunk that you keep returning to, and the back button returns you there. The other thing I wanted to point out about this is I was drawing this menu, and in the current version of the app we have screeds and screeds and screeds of text in here, and in the design spec it says if your menu item runs over 2 lines, it's not a menu, it's a dialogue. So I took that rule and then applied it to this situation and came up instead with this. So there's one button that says email settings, you click it and it opens up a dialog, and that's where you put all your spreads of text. And it's like, you take it for granted when you're using an app on your phone that they follow these kind of rules, and it makes really good sense. When you're starting from scratch with no framework and no way of knowing how to make those calls, you just like it's just like all these random guesses all over the place. Going like, oh, should I put this here or there? I don't know. This looks good. What do you think? You know. So those kind of little details just like really, they give me a lot of confidence in the stuff that I'm building, I guess. And then so in addition to this is like the sketch files, and then like I said, it's hooked up with Envision, so I wanted to give you a quick run across Envision as well to show you what I'm talking about. So Envision is a way of stitching all of those mock-ups together into an interactive mock-up. So it's a really like, it's an interaction design tool. So you have images, and then you can design. So if I go into build mode, you design, these are the hotspots, and you say, when someone clicks on that hotspot, load this next image, and you can define animations between them as well. So in practice, that looks like when I click on there, the menu opens, and I want to go over here, then it takes me to the group page. And it's so easy. Oh, look at this red. Oh, I will open the menu. I'll click the thing. You know, like it actually gives you a real experience of what the thing's like. To the extent that you can even you can text this to any phone, any smartphone, and then they'll get a text and they can open it up like an app on their phone. It's so good. So this is we use this tool both for designing and getting a feel for what the interaction is going to be like, also for communicating with the devs. So all of our design jobs will have a link to a particular screen and say you go from here to here to here. This is the workflow, and you're thinking in terms of flows, not in terms of like static forms or screens. But it's also really great for user testing because you can just pull it out on your phone and give it to someone, or even text it to their phone and give it to them, and they'll have a real experience of what it's like. And once again, it's so much cheaper to draw some pictures, make some links between the pictures, rather than building a whole app. And look, I won't go into detail about it. That's probably enough to know. Other than that, it also does nice little things, like it manages all of your assets and your source files, and it does version control and all that sort of stuff too. It's like one of the best pieces of software I've ever used, and it's getting better all the time. And it's deeply integrated with Sketch as well, so it's automatically syncing all the time. So when I changed my file on my computer, it updates immediately on the cloud, and all the devs have got the latest copy of what the design's supposed to be. It's it's really good.
Is it free?
No, they've got really generous free plans, and then really expensive. Once you're embedded like I am, then they start charging for it, and it's just like a no-brainer kind of expense for me. It's just so powerful and so beautiful and getting better all the time. It's like, yeah, I'm quite happy to pay for that.
So how much roughly?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. I think the cheap plans are like $10 a month or something like that, and then I think I'm on a $20 a month plan, and then the next one's like $100 a month. So it's all right. It's all right. They have thought of ways of deeply monetizing this product. That's all I'm saying. So yeah, I mean that's pretty much my download of my workflow, and I wonder if you all have questions, feedback, comments, suggestions. If you want to see something in more detail.
You mentioned the Sketch can export like CSS. Do you use that, or is it?
Not really. It's sort of like a whiz-bang feature, but in reality, and sometimes it's useful to, like, especially with stuff like defining line heights and margins and stuff on paragraphs. This kind of stuff that's really easy when you're in a design tool, but as soon as you switch over to CSS, it's really easy to get it wrong. So occasionally I'd use it for that sort of thing. And especially at the setup phase of the project, where you're sort of like setting your main rules for what does a paragraph look like and something like that, then you use it at that point. But as for like day-to-day development work, I mean, just write CSS by hand. I'm pretty big on people writing things by hand, you know. Yeah.
Someone who's just like started getting into all this design stuff, kind of just picking up along the way. I've kind of got like a basic grasp of HTML and CSS, but it's like where to from there, kind of. So like, how did coming from like a kind of developer background, did you move into like learning how to build this stuff? Because like I've gone through a lot of tutorials on CSS layouts, and that gets way complicated so fast. But then everything's very, very basic, or just like my entire career as a designer. So kind of, I guess you're the perfect person to ask. How did you move into a bit more advanced without being like a full-time focusing on design?
Yeah.
Sorry, bad question. Just
no,
how did you get better?
How I got better? I mean, I've been reading A List Apart since I was about 15. And there are other sites like Smashing Magazine's another one. There's like sites that have just really good content, and you immerse yourself in it, and it starts to rub off over time. The other thing is, once I started down this track, like, so my role at Loomio is really quite diverse. I do a lot of different things, and I'm in a like coordination kind of a role a lot of the time. And I just picked up a hunch very early on that it's good for developers to have design skills, and so we've sort of been cajoling everyone's sort of been cajoling each other to get better at design. So like quite frequently the devs will do their own mock-ups. They'll draw something out before they build it. It's really just a common practice that we do. And just from that, I think I changed the way that my eyes work. You know, I started paying attention to, like when I'm on Facebook, if you look at the way that Facebook does shadows on their cards versus the way that Google do shadows on their cards, there's a reason. You know, there's a rationale. There's like how they use colors and spaces and all that sort of stuff. Like you just start paying attention. And it's like I'm using Facebook like a designer now instead of like a user. I'm going like paying attention to all the little changes that they're making all the time and trying to uncover a little bit of what's the logic behind it. I've only been looking at material for like 6 weeks or something, and as soon as I got to engage with it a little bit, the comment from Rob, who's our lead developer, he was like, "We've just downloaded an expert designer to work with Rich," and it really feels that way. Like I really don't feel like an expert myself at all, but I found it incredibly accessible. Like it all just makes good sense, and it's like in the same way as when I got into Ruby on Rails, it's like there's these conventions that you have to learn, and then if you just trust them, if you just go like someone smart probably designed these and go along with it, you get to know the rationale and you appreciate it more and more. The other aspect is it's like just good HTML practice. So I've been writing HTML by hand since I was about 13 or something. Like I'm a nerd that way. And one of the principles inside HTML is this idea of separating content from presentation. And that's like a absolutely core principle to all kinds of design, like the universal challenge of like how do you separate form from function, right? And that way of thinking, like, okay, I need to deliver the content to someone, and I don't know if they're going to be navigating. Well, first of all, I don't know what kind of screen they're going to be using. If they're going to be on their phone or a big screen, or now we've got glasses, or like we really have to have watches. We have to really accommodate for a lot of different kinds of devices, and at the same time, the accessibility stuff, like you have to think about people that are navigating without any kind of spatial reference at all. HTML is really, really well designed for that, and that's its strong suit. Is separating out the content from the layout and the form and the design of it. So it's just been kind of part of this has been a process of discovering the value of decisions that were made 10, 20 years ago about the HTML spec and going, oh, okay, I understand now, like what's going on under the hood a little bit more. So I don't know, and yeah, the rest has just been like making time for it and getting over this idea that I'm not a designer. Like I'm crap at drawing, but I can drive software, so
Yeah, I found like when I'm like trying to design stuff, there's this awkward space between like sketching, and the problem with sketching is you can't like quickly move things around a lot. Like, do you find you can use Sketch to like just really quickly like chuck things around? I've been using like Google Drawings a bit for it, just moving things around. But
yeah, nothing really beats paper and pen or like a whiteboard for that. And for that, it's just like it's sort of about what level of detail you go to. Like as soon as I get on a piece of software, like before I was using Sketch, I was using Balsamiq, which is another mock-up app, which is really good, and it intentionally tries to pull you away from the pixel level of detail and just says, use a block that indicates there's some text there. You don't actually have to put the text in. That's useful, but I've sort of found that I either want Sketch, which is absolutely pixel perfect, or a whiteboard, which is just like scribble, 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 and then you can do 100 mock-ups in one sitting, you know, and it's just like getting into that habit of drawing it all the time. And like I say, having a notebook and just like being really scribbly about it. And also, it's hard to see in here, I guess, but so all of the content of the screen here, I don't care about that at the moment. Like my focus is on the nav bar, and through any design, any session that I'm designing in, you know, like when I sit down for a day or something to do some design work, I'm not trying to fix everything all at once. It's sort of like I take it for granted that this threads page is in a good enough state. Like there's room for improvement, but it's good enough. And you just choose your challenge and focus on it. And that means like showing it to people and hearing. It's so easy to get so much feedback from someone when you show them a mock-up. And like I say, writing down what they said, and that becomes your list of jobs to do for the next week. You know, like, it's really important to do that writing things down stage, because as soon as you actually get to work, you lose all that clarity about what someone said. But if you just write down like, oh, they said they wanted to see this thing in the nav bar or something like that, just grab it, and then draw it, and just get in that habit of like drawing a lot. Yeah.
Just trying to work out how to phrase my question. And I'm thinking about the work that I usually, like my work, and how there's often a designer who's given you a whole bunch of Illustrator fireworks files, and it's your job as a developer to make it look like that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was sort of thinking how I could use my development skills to kind of pinpoint, what parts of this are confusing for people, like in terms of accessibility. If it's like a designer who is a designer and hasn't come from a web development background. Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking about the middle ground, and also what happens when someone, like, you're building an app where people want it to be more complicated and flashy than Loomio is.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
like, how can I, as a developer, like, push forward those things that you've been saying, being like, look, like, this isn't clear, this looks really nice.
Yeah.
But for someone who, like, if you're using this as a screenreader, here's why it doesn't work.
Yeah. I guess you sort of develop a suite of arguments for this sort of stuff, and I think I got those arguments from reading like a list apart and stuff like that, like mailing lists and stuff, where you sort of, it's a really common problem, right? Like you're a dev and you're working with a designer who doesn't quite get it, and you build up these arguments. I mean, one of them is I've worked with designers that are like, they're graphic designers, they're print designers, and they're trying to build a website, and you've got to say, like, it's absolutely critical that they give up control on what the finished product looks like. Like, they can't control what the product looks like. Like, that's one of the joys and the crushing frustrations of the web, is you don't know what device they're going to be using, and there's a million different versions of what it might look like, and they just need to get over that early and go, like, your job is to deliver the content in a logical structure and put some kind of coherent look and feel across it, so that it, like, conveys, you know, both the important information and the brand identity, whatever it is. Your job is not to lay it out like a poster. It won't work. It won't work. And explain, you know, like, that the range of devices that people are using to navigate the web is just extending further and further and further, and it's not going to slow down anytime soon. Like, because at the one end you've got, going down to like Google Glass, but at the other end you've got immersive 3D interactive, and it's like, you still should be able to deliver one piece of content that works across all of those devices. That's like the promise of the web, is that you allow people to consume the content in whatever way makes sense to them. And so maybe that's a way that a designer can kind of get excited about the challenge rather than being frustrated at the limitations. You know, there's so much stuff that you can do so easily in Illustrator that you can't do in CSS, or you can't do easily. You know, stuff like about multiple columns and vertical alignments and stuff like that, which is just so irritating. And a designer's not going to get them immediately, but if you sort of explain it in terms of this is the strong point of the web. It's not, yes, it's a constraint, but it's a productive constraint.
Would you imagine that Sketch is a tool that can be used by designers who don't have a development background?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I've noticed actually their marketing is getting more and more in that direction, less about, hey, you're a dev and you want to draw pictures, more about like this is just the tool for designers now. So they're obviously like pushing that direction. I know a few non-devs that are using it and loving it too. And that's another sort of habit that we have enculturated a little bit, not as much as I'd like, but a little bit, is like anyone that has an opinion about something, or a suggestion or a feature idea or something like that, it's like, can you please draw it for me? And it's not realistic for everyone. I mean, Sketch, I think it costs $100 one-off to buy. It's not realistic for everyone to buy a copy, but there are lots of drawing tools that, or even paper and pen, like I say, like there are ways, some you can use for free. Like getting people in that habit of drawing the thing and talking about the mock-up rather than talking about your idea of what the mock-up might be in your head. Really, really like productive, and it actually gives, once people get over that and go like, yes, I'm willing to draw something, it actually makes the conversations really a lot more productive and aligned and collaborative and useful, rather than just like people randomly discussing their misapprehensions about someone else's opinion.
It was a great session, especially with somebody without a development background. But I think, yeah, as you pointed out, it would be awesome to just change the title around and give it to designers as well.
Development for designers?
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Design for everyone.
Did you have a question, Derek?
Kind of. I'm interested. I know that, I guess, having been in the middle of a quite intensive design process for the last 5 weeks, I'm just really aware that how much context has already been laid out for Loomio. Like, this is the nth design, right?
Yeah, this is 3 years down the track.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And just how
and we haven't really added a feature in 18 months.
Right. Yeah. And so I'm just hyper aware of how different the process can be when what you're starting with is you're not sure exactly what you're building or what features are necessary, what features aren't.
Yeah.
I'm just curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
In general.
And I've seen there's projects around us that are in that sort of space, but we're not actually quite sure what we're building yet.
Yeah.
And that was my first slide, was like, choose a UX that a problem that people actually care about.
Right.
And that involves talking to people.
Totally.
And exposing yourself to feedback a lot, and articulating what is your app, what does it do. Like, it's really, really important to be able to say, I'm building this thing that does this, that solves this problem for these people. And I don't know, there's a sort of archetype of a developer that just wants to be in the dark room, like hacking away on some mad scientist project. And that's fun, and I like to do that too, but it's like, if you're not able to communicate to a layperson about what you're building, you don't know what you're building. You just don't, and you're having a guess, and good on you, and that's nice to experiment, but focus on articulating what it is that you're building. And that comes from a whole range of different practices as well, like just doing proper test-driven development forces you to know what you're building, because you have to write it out, you do this, and then this happens. And there's lots of practices like that in the sort of like whole ecosystem of software development that help you along that track. But yeah, I think talking to real people is the main one.
I have to jump out, but thanks.
Come in.
Did you use Bootstrap to manage the just general layout of stuff?
So
That kind of is starting to sort of think like, oh my god, I can't get off using Bootstrap.
Yeah.
Because it's something like layouts, flows,
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Bootstrap is good. We've used it heavily, and once again, it's a UI framework that helps you not have to think about boring problems, like how do you do 2 columns that collapse on mobile.
Switch.
But as I've gotten more into this, I sort of feel like it's not opinionated enough. It sort of gives you this palette of things that you can do, but it doesn't actually tell you how to use them. So we are slowly, piece by piece, using less and less of Bootstrap, and eventually we'll rip it out entirely. And you can, like, the way that the actual code is structured with Bootstrap, you can have just the layout, just the grid, and nothing else if you want it. Like, you can select which parts you want, and so we are kind of selectively going through and going, okay, we're using our own styles for buttons now, we're not using Bootstrap buttons, and just piece by piece carving it out. But it's a really excellent prototyping tool. Yeah. And sometimes depending on the job, but sometimes I find it's actually even faster to prototype in Bootstrap, like with a fresh app and just using HTML and putting buttons that don't actually work but look right. I find it sometimes faster to do that in code than it is to draw it, because I'm just more comfortable in that space, and it is really useful for doing this kind of mock-ups.
Are there any frameworks that you know that you think are opinionated enough?
Well, yeah, I mean, Material's the first one that I've really gone deep on.
So is Material like Bootstrap, essentially? So
yeah, I'll just show you quickly the spec. So it's just google.com/design. So for instance, components, buttons, just a huge amount of detail on their approach to buttons, when to use a button, what a button looks like, how does a button work in a dialogue, what's its vertical height, what's its spacing, what's the target area when you're on mobile, like just so much detail about buttons, right? And then it's the same for every single last component. Like, what's a good one? Lists are really great. So it's really easy to make lists that look terrible. But if you follow a bit of basic design practice, like this is what this is a 2-line list. So each element has 2 lines in it, and there's simple. You'll see if you read through it. There's stuff like there we go. The primary distinguishing content. So they say put something on the left that helps the user distinguish this item from that item. The most distinguishable thing in this case is the user who sent you that email. So they put their face along that. So it's easy to scan down the list and find the most important thing. And then there's a hierarchy of in this case it's the subject line and the person, and then the start of the text, and this additional information. Like the way that they've done the typographical rules for this sort of mean you don't have to think about it, and it's really, really logical. And just the margins, like the spacing of, so this space here and this space here as compared to this space here, like they're all harmonious. And if you just follow the rules, it comes out looking that way. You didn't have to be a genius. Yeah.
So sorry, I didn't quite understand when the question just before is Material like Bootstrap? As in, does it have its own classes and it just magically puts the right amount of padding on?
Not exactly.
Yeah.
Not exactly, because it's language independent, it's device independent. Like you'll find that there are packages. So for instance, there's an Angular Material package. And so yeah, and some of the things, I'll show you a good example of one, like pickers, I think. Yeah, stuff like date pickers and time pickers and stuff like that. So easy to get wrong. If you just use the package, you get them for free, and they're really good, and they work across devices, and they're accessible, and things like auto-completing forms, same thing. Like can be such a mission, but if you've got a package to handle it for you, then you can do it. And obviously there's lots of different devices that it's ready, platforms that it's ready to go on as well. So I only know about web dev. I don't really know about different kinds of mobile and stuff, but I know that they have packages ready to go for that too. Yeah. Any other questions? Cool. Wow, right on time. My goodness.
Cool. Thanks, Rich.
Thanks,
Oh, good. Yeah, goodbye, recurring screen.